The hall was designed to make conflict look elegant. Light drifted across its curved ceiling in slow constellations, stars rearranging themselves every few seconds as if even the universe here refused to stay still for long. Delegates filled the seats in quiet clusters, their clothing shimmering with subtle technologies, their voices softened by translation fields that made every language sound equally calm, equally reasonable. It was a place where disagreement was supposed to feel like collaboration, where rejection wore a polite smile. Adam leaned back slightly in his seat, watching the pattern more than the people. The pattern was easier. Candidate steps forward. Profile appears. Polite interest. Selection, applause, repeat. It was all very efficient, like a machine pretending to be a conversation. A woman from a water-dwelling species was chosen first, her translucent skin catching the artificial starlight. The man who selected her bowed with careful precision, as if rehearsed down to the angle of his spine. Applause followed, warm and predictable. Then another, and another. Adam folded his hands, letting his gaze drift to the edges of the hall, where the candidates waited before stepping forward. Some shifted nervously. Others stood perfectly still, as if stillness itself might be mistaken for confidence. A few even smiled at nothing in particular, which Adam suspected was a survival strategy. He exhaled quietly. If I see one more collaborative mindset highlighted in gold, I might defect to another galaxy, he muttered. The translator field softened his words into something less sarcastic, but not enough to hide the intent. The woman seated beside him gave him a brief, disapproving glance, then returned her attention to the center. Adam offered her an apologetic half-smile that he didn't mean. Another candidate stepped forward, another round of polite evaluation, another safe choice, and then the rhythm broke. She didn't step forward so much as arrive. There was no hesitation in her movement, no adjustment of posture, no attempt to appear smaller or more agreeable. She simply walked into the center of the hall and stopped, as if the space had been waiting for her rather than the other way around. At first glance, she looked human. That was the first mistake. The second came a moment later, when the light shifted just enough to reveal the subtle differences, the sharper line of her jaw, the stillness in her gaze, and most of all, the long, elegant curve of her ears, rising slightly behind strands of dark hair. The projection above her flickered into place. Kyra. The rest of the file followed, but not in the same confident, glowing format as the others. The words felt restrained, as if whoever had written them had chosen each one carefully, aware that they might be challenged. Behavioral concerns, non-compliant, independent to a disruptive degree. Adam raised an eyebrow. That's a creative way to say, doesn't tolerate nonsense, he murmured. No one laughed. The silence in the hall shifted, subtle but undeniable. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was something more refined, more socially acceptable. Avoidance, dressed up as professionalism. The first participant called to choose did not hesitate. He chose someone else, then the second, the third. Each time Kyra remained exactly where she was, her posture unchanged, her expression unreadable. She didn't fidget. She didn't glance around. She didn't try to make herself more appealing. Adam watched her instead of the others, watched the way she stood as if she had already accepted the outcome, whatever it would be. There was no tension in her shoulders, no expectation in her eyes, just stillness. It was oddly unsettling. She's not even pretending, Adam said under his breath. That's bold. The woman beside him shifted slightly farther away. Another candidate was chosen. Applause followed, softer now. Kyra's file flickered again, a brief addition appearing beneath the others. History of defensive incidents. Adam tilted his head. Defensive, he repeated quietly. That's an interesting choice of word. The selection continued, and continued, until there was only one participant left to choose. Adam. He straightened slightly, feeling the attention shift toward him. The hall seemed quieter now, the artificial stars dimming just enough to draw focus to the center. Kyra was still there. Of course she was. For a brief moment, Adam considered the expected outcome. He could choose someone else, someone easier, someone whose file didn't come with carefully worded warnings. It would be simple, predictable, applauded. He glanced at Kyra again. She wasn't looking at him. She wasn't looking at anyone. It was as if the entire process had already ended for her. Adam exhaled slowly, then stood. "Well," he said, just loud enough for the nearest rows to hear, "I do enjoy making things awkward." A few heads turned. He stepped forward, the soft hum of the floor adjusting to his movement. The projection shifted, awaiting his selection. For a second, he did nothing. Then he lifted his hand. "I choose her." The words landed without decoration, without hesitation. Silence followed. Not the polite, expectant silence from before, but something heavier, sharper. The kind of silence that arrives when something unexpected refuses to explain itself. Kyra looked at him then. Really looked. Her eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in assessment, as if she were trying to determine whether he had made a mistake or a statement. Adam met her gaze, offering a small, almost casual nod. "Hi," he said, because it felt like the simplest thing to do. The silence deepened. Somewhere in the hall, someone cleared their throat. Another shifted in their seat. The carefully constructed atmosphere of calm cooperation cracked just a little. Kyra took a single step forward. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't hesitant. It was deliberate. She stopped in front of him, close enough that the subtle differences in her features became clearer, more defined. Up close, she didn't look dangerous. She looked tired. "You picked wrong," she said. Her voice was steady, unhurried, not accusatory, not defensive, certain. Adam blinked once, then smiled slightly. "That's possible," he admitted. "I have a strong track record of questionable decisions." For a fraction of a second, something shifted in her expression. Not quite amusement, not quite disbelief. Then it was gone. The projection above them confirmed the selection, its light settling into a steady glow. The hall, after a long moment, responded with scattered applause. It sounded uncertain. Adam glanced around, then leaned slightly toward Kyra. "On the bright side," he added quietly, "at least we've already disappointed everyone. That saves time." This time the shift in her expression was unmistakable. It was small, but it was there. The corridor assigned to them curved along the outer ring of the station, where the transparent panels revealed a slow, silent drift of fractured asteroids held in place by distant gravity anchors. The stars beyond were sharper here, less filtered, as if the station trusted this section with a clearer truth. Adam walked a half step ahead at first, then slowed when he realized Kyra wasn't matching his pace. She followed, but not in a way that suggested agreement with the direction. It felt more like she was observing him from a moving distance, measuring something he hadn't quite said yet. The corridor lights adjusted automatically as they passed, dimming slightly behind them. It gave the impression that the station itself was reluctant to linger on their presence. That applause was enthusiastic, Adam said, glancing back over his shoulder. "I think one person almost committed to it." Kyra didn't answer. He stopped walking. She took one more step before stopping as well, leaving a small but deliberate gap between them. Her gaze rested on him now, direct and unblinking. "You're waiting for something," she said. Adam tilted his head. "I was going to say the same thing." "For what?" she asked. "For you to tell me why I picked wrong," he replied, as if it were the most obvious continuation of the conversation. There was a brief pause. Kyra studied him again, slower this time. Her expression didn't harden, but it didn't soften either. It remained precise. "You didn't read enough," she said, "or you ignored what you read." "Those are both possible," Adam admitted. "I've been accused of both professionally." "That wasn't a joke," she said. "I know," he replied, nodding once. "That's why it was funny." The corner of her mouth shifted, almost imperceptibly, then settled back into stillness. "You don't choose someone like me without a reason," she continued. "People don't do that here." Adam leaned slightly against the curved wall, folding his arms loosely. The station hummed beneath them, a low, constant vibration that made the silence feel less empty. "I had a reason," he said. Kyra's eyes narrowed just enough to register interest. "Let me guess," she said. "You saw something no one else did. You wanted to prove a point, or you felt sorry for me." Adam winced slightly. Those all sound exhausting. They're common, she replied. I try not to be common, he said. It's bad for my reputation. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she turned her head slightly, glancing toward the transparent panel beside them. Outside, a fragment of rock the size of a building rotated slowly, its surface lined with faint mining scars that glowed faintly under distant light. Then explain it, she said. Adam followed her gaze for a moment before speaking. Your file, he began, didn't match the way people were reacting to it. Kyra looked back at him. That's not an explanation, she said. It's the beginning of one, he replied. She waited. Adam uncrossed his arms, pushing himself off the wall. He took a step closer, not enough to invade her space, but enough to make the conversation feel less like a distant exchange. Most of the profiles were polished, he said. Clean, carefully worded. Yours wasn't. That's not a compliment, she said. I wasn't offering one, he replied. I was noticing a pattern. Her gaze sharpened slightly. Go on, she said. The incidents listed, Adam continued, were labeled as behavioral issues, but the descriptions didn't support that. They described responses, specific ones, contextual ones. Kyra said nothing. They also avoided detail, he added, which is usually where the truth is hiding. A faint shift passed through her posture, subtle but real. And what truth did you find? She asked. Adam hesitated for a fraction of a second, not because he didn't know, but because he was choosing how to say it. You weren't attacking people, he said. You were stopping them. The silence that followed was different from the one in the hall. It wasn't heavy, it was focused. Kyra's expression didn't change, but something behind it did, like a door opening just enough to confirm it existed. You read between the lines, she said. I read the lines, Adam replied. The space between them just made more sense. She exhaled slowly, her gaze drifting past him for a moment, as if recalibrating. That's still not a reason to choose me, she said. It was enough, he answered. Kyra shook her head slightly. No, it wasn't. Adam smiled faintly. You're right. Her eyes flicked back to his, sharper now. Then what was? She asked. He considered the question, not rushing it. Everyone else avoided you, he said. Not because they understood your file, but because they didn't want to deal with what it implied. Kyra's jaw tightened slightly. And you did? She said. I did, he replied, because I don't trust systems that reward comfort over accuracy. There was a pause, then another. Kyra took a step closer. It wasn't aggressive, it wasn't cautious, it was deliberate. You think this is about a system, she said. I think everything here is about a system, Adam replied. That's kind of the point of a station this size. That's not what I meant, she said. I know, he said quietly. Their eyes held for a moment, the distance between them narrowing without either of them moving further. You think you understand me? She said. No, Adam replied immediately. I think I understand why people misunderstand you. That stopped her. Not completely, but enough. A flicker of something, uncertainty maybe, crossed her expression before settling into something more controlled. That's a convenient distinction, she said. It's an important one, he replied. She studied him again, longer this time, as if searching for the flaw in his reasoning, the hidden angle she expected to find. You're not trying to fix me, she said. It wasn't a question. Adam shook his head. I don't fix people, he said. I can barely fix my own reports. That's not reassuring, she replied. It's honest, he said. Another pause. Then unexpectedly, Kyra let out a quiet breath that almost resembled a laugh. Honesty is usually what gets people into trouble here, she said. Adam grinned slightly. Then I'm right on schedule. The station lights flickered softly as a distant system recalibrated, casting brief shadows across the corridor. Kyra glanced toward the far end, where their assigned workspace waited behind a sealed door. You still picked wrong, she said, but her voice had lost its earlier certainty. Adam followed her gaze, then looked back at her. Maybe, he said, but I don't think you're as predictable as everyone hoped. Kyra tilted her head slightly. That's not a compliment either, she said. No, Adam agreed, but it might be useful. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Kyra turned and walked toward the door. This time Adam didn't go ahead. He walked beside her, not leading, not following, just matching her pace. And for the first time since the selection, it didn't feel like a mistake. The lab did not look like a place where people learned to understand each other. It looked like a place where misunderstandings were preserved, categorized, and occasionally admired for their complexity. Panels of shifting data hovered in midair, each one translating patterns of communication from dozens of species into visual structures that tried very hard to look objective. Adam stepped inside first, then paused just long enough for Kyra to enter beside him instead of behind him. The door sealed with a quiet, decisive tone, as if the station itself had decided they were now officially a problem to be contained. "Well," Adam said, looking around at the floating displays, "nothing says cooperation like 10,000 years of mutual confusion rendered in blue light." Kyra ignored the comment at first, her attention moving across the room with sharp precision. She didn't seem impressed by the technology, which was unusual. Most people stared at the displays for at least a few seconds, if only to pretend they understood them. She walked toward the central interface, her fingers hovering just above the surface before activating it. The projections shifted instantly, rearranging into layered streams of interaction logs. "You're wrong," she said. Adam glanced at her. "That was fast." "This isn't confusion," she continued, gesturing slightly at the data. "It's pattern repetition. The same mistakes, recorded more efficiently." He stepped closer, tilting his head as he examined one of the streams. Symbols translated themselves into a familiar language, though the structure still felt slightly off, like a sentence that had been rearranged just enough to lose its original meaning. "Ah," he said, "so it's not that we don't understand each other. It's that we misunderstand each other consistently." "Yes," Kyra replied. "That's actually worse," he said. "It's predictable," she corrected. Adam considered that for a moment, then nodded. "You say that like it's an advantage." "It is," she said. "If you know where the mistake will happen, you can stop it." He smiled faintly. "You make it sound easy." Kyra glanced at him. "It isn't." There was no humor in her voice, but there wasn't tension either. Just a statement, clean and unadorned. Adam activated another panel, pulling up a set of interaction logs from a recent exchange program. The data unfolded in layers, each one representing a different interpretation of the same conversation. "All right," he said, "let's see how people manage to misunderstand each other in 4 different ways at once." Kyra stepped closer, her shoulder nearly brushing his as she focused on the display. Neither of them acknowledged the proximity. The first layer showed the original exchange, direct, concise, almost blunt. The second layer translated it into a more formal tone, smoothing out the sharper edges. The third added contextual assumptions, filling in gaps that had never been there. The fourth changed everything. Adam stared at it for a second longer than necessary. "Impressive," he said quietly. "They managed to turn a request for clarification into a personal insult." Kyra's gaze remained steady on the data. "It wasn't intentional." "That almost makes it worse," Adam replied. "It makes it normal," she said. He glanced at her, studying the way she processed the information. Not reacting emotionally, but not detached either. There was a kind of controlled intensity in the way she observed patterns, as if she were constantly filtering for something more precise than what was presented. "You've done this before," he said. Kyra didn't look at him. "Yes." "Successfully?" he asked. "No," she replied. Adam nodded slowly. "Consistent with the theme." That earned him a brief look. "You think failure is amusing," she said. "I think pretending success is more common than it is." "That's amusing," he replied. Her expression shifted slightly. Not quite approval, but not dismissal either. They continued working. Time in the lab didn't move in a straight line. It stretched and folded around the data, marked less by hours and more by how many patterns they dismantled and rebuilt. Kyra moved through the information with sharp efficiency, isolating inconsistencies, stripping away assumptions. Adam followed a different rhythm, connecting fragments that didn't immediately seem related, testing interpretations that occasionally failed in spectacular ways. At one point, he adjusted a translation parameter, and watched as the entire dataset restructured itself into something that looked almost coherent. "Ah," he said, "I've fixed it." Kyra leaned in slightly, examining the result. "This is worse," she said. Adam blinked. "Really?" "You removed the contradictions," she explained. "Now it looks like it makes sense." He stared at the display, then sighed. "I knew it was too easy." She reached past him, her fingers brushing the interface as she restored the original parameters. The projections shifted back, the inconsistencies returning like familiar flaws. "Better," she said. Adam shook his head. "I'm starting to think clarity is overrated." "It depends on what you're trying to hide," Kyra replied. He glanced at her, a small smile forming. "You say things like that very casually." "They're not complicated," she said. "No," he agreed. "They're just inconvenient." A brief silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, but focused. Kyra moved to another panel, pulling up a different set of interactions, this time involving defensive responses. The patterns were sharper here, more abrupt, like conversations that had been cut short before they could stabilize. "These," she said, "are the ones they flagged." Adam stepped beside her again, studying the data. "They labeled these as aggression," he said. "Yes," she replied. He traced one of the exchanges with his finger, following the progression from initial contact to escalation. "They're wrong," he said. Kyra didn't respond immediately. Instead, she watched him, as if measuring whether he truly understood what he was looking at. "Explain," she said. Adam exhaled slowly, organizing his thoughts. "The escalation points," he began, "they're all responses to boundary violations. The pattern isn't aggression, it's defense." Kyra's gaze sharpened slightly. "And the system calls that a problem," she said. "Of course it does," Adam replied. "Defense is disruptive. It interrupts the flow of polite misunderstanding." For a fraction of a second, something in her expression shifted, something lighter, almost amused. "That's an efficient description," she said. "I specialize in efficient descriptions," he said. "They're easier to ignore." She looked back at the data, but the shift remained, subtle but present. "You're not wrong," she said. Adam raised an eyebrow. That sounded almost like a compliment. "It wasn't," she replied. "Good," he said. "I'd hate to set unrealistic expectations." This time she didn't hide the reaction. It was small, but it was real. And for a moment, the lab didn't feel like a place where misunderstandings were preserved. It felt like a place where, slowly, carefully, something else was being built. The station shifted its gravity cycle without warning, a subtle recalibration that most people never noticed. In the lab, it felt like a quiet breath passing through the floor, a reminder that even stability here was manufactured. Kyra did not react. Adam did, but only slightly, adjusting his stance with a faint frown. "I'm starting to suspect this place enjoys testing balance more than it enjoys actual research." "It's efficient," Kyra said, not looking up from the data stream she was dissecting. "Unstable environments reveal more." "That explains the selection process," Adam replied. She didn't answer, but the corner of her mouth moved just enough to suggest the comment had landed. The display in front of them expanded into a layered reconstruction of a past incident. The system labeled it as a hostile escalation event, but the raw data told a different story. Fragmented audio, partial translations, biometric spikes that didn't align with the official interpretation. Kyra isolated the moment of escalation with a precise gesture. The surrounding data dimmed, leaving only the exchange suspended between them. A voice, translated but imperfect, cut through the silence. "Request denied." Another voice followed, sharper. "Clarify request." The system flagged the next response as aggressive. Adam watched the shift in the pattern, his expression tightening slightly. "That's where it breaks," he said. Kyra nodded once. "That's where they say it breaks." "And you don't agree," he said. "No," she replied. Adam folded his arms, leaning closer to the projection. "All right, walk me through it." Kyra hesitated, not because she didn't know, but because she was choosing how much to say. Then she adjusted the playback, slowing the sequence just enough to expose the underlying structure. "They violated a boundary," she said. "The initial request wasn't neutral. It assumed compliance." Adam frowned slightly. "That's subtle." "It's not," she said. "It's normalized." He exhaled quietly. That might be worse. Kyra glanced at him briefly, then returned her focus to the data. The response wasn't aggression, it was correction. Correction that didn't match expectations, Adam added. Yes, and the system doesn't like that, he said. It categorizes it, she corrected. Right, he said, because labeling something is easier than understanding it. Kyra's hand moved through the interface again, pulling up additional layers, context logs, environmental data, previous interactions between the same individuals. The pattern deepened, revealing a history that the official report had reduced to a single moment. Adam stared at it for a second longer than necessary. They ignored all of this, he said. Yes, Kyra replied. That seems inefficient. It's convenient, she said. Adam nodded slowly. Of course it is. The lab dimmed slightly as the station adjusted its external shielding, the distant glow of an energy field rippling across the transparent panels. Outside, a cluster of mining drones drifted past, their movements synchronized in a way that felt almost deliberate. Inside, the silence sharpened. Kyra deactivated the projection with a small, controlled motion. The data collapsed into nothing, leaving the space between them unexpectedly empty. They called me aggressive, she said. The words didn't carry weight in the way they might have elsewhere. They were too precise for that, too carefully placed. Adam didn't respond immediately. He didn't look away either. I assumed they would, he said after a moment. Kyra's gaze shifted to him, sharper now. You assumed, she repeated. I read the pattern, he said. That's not the same thing. No, he agreed, but it's close enough to recognize when it repeats. She studied him, searching for something, hesitation maybe, or the kind of careful sympathy she had learned to distrust. She didn't find it. They didn't record everything, she said. Adam tilted his head slightly. They rarely do. They recorded the response, she continued, not what caused it. He nodded once. That's usually where the story becomes less convenient. Kyra took a step back, creating space between them, though it didn't feel like distance. More like recalibration. There was a group, she said. They were exploiting access privileges. Not violently, quietly. It was acceptable. Adam's expression didn't change, but something in his posture did. An increased stillness, a sharper focus. And you interrupted that, he said. Yes. And they didn't appreciate it, he added. No. He let out a small breath. Strange. People usually love being corrected when they're benefiting from something they shouldn't be. Kyra's eyes narrowed slightly. You're making a joke. I'm making a pattern, he replied. A brief silence followed. Then unexpectedly, Kyra let out a quiet, almost disbelieving sound that might have been a laugh if it had been allowed to exist fully. They said I escalated the situation, she said. Adam nodded. I imagine you did. Her gaze sharpened. You agree with them? I agree with the wording, he said. Not the implication. Kyra tilted her head slightly, studying him again. Explain, she said. Adam shifted his weight, considering the data that was no longer visible, but still present in both of their minds. You escalated, he said, because the situation required escalation. That's not the same as causing the problem. Kyra didn't respond, but she didn't look away either. The system doesn't distinguish between those things, she said. No, Adam agreed, because that would require it to admit that the initial conditions were flawed. And it doesn't do that, she said. It's not designed to, he replied. The lab remained quiet, the hum of the station settling into the background again. Kyra moved back toward the interface, her fingers hovering just above it, before activating a new set of data. This time, the projections formed a comparative model, multiple incidents aligned side by side, their patterns overlapping in subtle, revealing ways. They all follow the same structure, she said. Adam stepped beside her again, their shoulders nearly aligned as they studied the display. Boundary violation, he said. Response. Reclassification. Yes. He traced one of the patterns with his finger, then another. And every time, he added, the response becomes the problem. Kyra nodded once. That's the system, she said. Adam smiled faintly. It's a very polite way of avoiding responsibility. Kyra glanced at him, the earlier tension in her posture easing just slightly. You're not surprised, she said. No, he replied. I've seen it before. Here, she asked. Everywhere, he said. That answer lingered. Kyra looked back at the data, but her focus had shifted. It was no longer just analysis, it was recognition. You still chose me, she said. Adam didn't hesitate. Yes. She turned toward him fully now, the question in her expression no longer hidden. Why? She asked. He met her gaze, steady and unguarded. Because you didn't adapt to it, he said. The words settled between them, simple and precise. Kyra held his gaze for a moment longer, then looked away, not in dismissal, but in thought. That's not considered a strength, she said. Adam's smile returned, softer this time. I've noticed, he said. The station lights shifted again, casting a different pattern across the lab. Kyra exhaled slowly, her posture adjusting, not relaxing, but aligning. Then you really did pick wrong, she said. Adam looked at the data, then back at her. Or, he said, I picked something the system doesn't know what to do with. This time, when the silence followed, it didn't feel like something waiting to break. It felt like something waiting to continue. The feedback arrived without ceremony, which was the station's preferred way of delivering resistance. No raised voices, no direct objections, just a quiet update to their shared workspace. A new layer of annotations hovering over their work, like polite disapproval made visible. Adam stared at the floating comments, his head tilted slightly to one side. Ah, he said, we've been professionally disagreed with. Kyra didn't look up immediately. She finished isolating a data set, then closed the panel before shifting her attention to the new layer. Her eyes moved quickly, absorbing each note without pause. Tone adjustment recommended, Adam read aloud. That's my favorite. It means we don't like what you said, but we can't prove it's wrong. Kyra's gaze flicked toward him briefly. It means they want it to sound less direct. It already sounds less direct, he said. I removed 3 sentences that were significantly more entertaining. That wasn't the goal, she replied. It should have been, Adam said. Clarity and entertainment are an underrated combination. Kyra ignored that, focusing instead on a specific annotation. She expanded it with a small gesture, revealing a more detailed critique. Conclusions may be perceived as confrontational, she read. Adam winced slightly. Maybe perceived. That's impressive. They managed to disagree with a possibility. Kyra's expression didn't change, but the pause that followed carried weight. They're not wrong, she said. Adam glanced at her. You think it's confrontational? I think it's accurate, she replied, and accuracy is often perceived that way. He considered that, then nodded. Fair. The annotations continued, each one carefully phrased, each one avoiding direct contradiction while still pushing in the same direction. Soften this, adjust that, reconsider implications. Kyra deactivated the layer with a sharp motion. The comments vanished, leaving their original work intact. They want it changed, she said. Of course they do, Adam replied. It's working. That's not how they define working. No, he agreed. Their definition is much more comfortable. Kyra stepped back from the interface, her posture tightening slightly, not defensive, but focused. If we change it, she said, it becomes something else. Adam nodded. Yes. And if we don't, she continued, they won't accept it. Also, yes. She looked at him directly now. So what do we do? Adam leaned against the edge of the console, folding his arms loosely. We make it harder to ignore. Kyra's eyes narrowed slightly. How? By being precise, he said. Not softer, clearer. She studied him for a moment. That sounds similar. It's not, he replied. Softness removes edges. Clarity sharpens them. Kyra turned back to the interface, reactivating the data. The projections returned, layered and complex, each pattern intersecting with others in ways that revealed more than they concealed. They're objecting to the conclusions, she said. Then we strengthen the structure that leads to them, Adam replied. Kyra's fingers moved through the interface, isolating a specific sequence. This section, she said, they flagged it as too direct. Adam stepped beside her, examining the data. Because it is. That's the point, she said. I know, he replied, so we make it unavoidable. She glanced at him. Explain. Adam adjusted the display, pulling in additional data sets, comparative models, historical records, predictive simulations. The projections expanded, forming a more intricate structure. Right now, he said, they can argue that this is interpretation. Kyra followed his movements, her focus sharpening as the structure took shape. And if we do this, she said slowly, it becomes pattern confirmation. Exactly, Adam replied. She worked alongside him now, their movements aligning without discussion. Data shifted, connections formed. Inconsistencies were not removed but emphasized, highlighted in a way that made them impossible to dismiss as anomalies. At one point, Adam paused, looking at the growing structure. This is going to make them very uncomfortable, he said. Kyra didn't look up. Good. He smiled slightly. I like your approach to collaboration. It's efficient, she replied. Everything is efficient with you, he said. I'm starting to feel inefficient by comparison. You are, she said. Adam blinked. That was immediate. You asked, she replied. He nodded slowly. I did. That's on me. A brief silence followed, broken only by the soft hum of the station and the shifting of data. Kyra adjusted another layer, then paused. They're going to push back harder, she said. Probably, Adam agreed. They might remove us from the project. That's also possible. She turned toward him, her expression steady. You're not concerned. Adam considered that for a moment. I am, he said, just not in a way that changes what we're doing. Kyra watched him closely, as if measuring the consistency of his response. You're not trying to protect this, she said. I'm trying to complete it, he replied. And if completing it means losing it? Adam shrugged slightly. Then it was never ours to begin with. Kyra held his gaze for a moment longer, then looked back at the data. That's not how most people think, she said. I've noticed, he replied. She resumed working, but the rhythm had changed. It was more deliberate now, less reactive. The tension from the feedback hadn't disappeared, but it had been redirected, sharpened into something more useful. Here, she said after a moment, highlighting a section. This is where they'll focus their objections. Adam leaned in slightly. Because it connects everything. Yes, he nodded. Then we make that connection stronger. Kyra adjusted the structure again, reinforcing the link, adding supporting data that extended beyond their initial scope. This wasn't part of the assignment, she said. It is now, Adam replied. She glanced at him briefly. You're expanding the argument. I'm completing it, he said. That increases the risk. It increases the accuracy, he replied. Kyra considered that, then continued. The projections grew more complex, but also more coherent. The patterns that had once been subtle were now clear, their repetition undeniable. Adam stepped back slightly, studying the result. Well, he said, that's difficult to ignore. Kyra deactivated a minor layer, refining the presentation. They'll still try. Of course they will, he replied. That's part of the system. She looked at the final structure, her expression unreadable. They'll say it's too confrontational, she said. Adam smiled faintly. Then we've communicated effectively. This time, Kyra didn't hide the reaction. It wasn't just a shift. It was a brief, quiet laugh. You're not normal, she said. I've been informed, he replied. The lab lights adjusted again, casting a steady glow over the data. Kyra straightened slightly, her posture aligning with something more certain. We don't change it, she said. Adam nodded. We don't change it. The decision settled between them. Not heavy, not dramatic, just clear. And for the first time, the resistance around them didn't feel like an obstacle. It felt like confirmation. The presentation chamber was quieter than the selection hall had been, but it carried a different kind of tension, one that didn't pretend to be polite. The walls curved inward slightly, focusing attention toward the center platform, where a single interface waited, suspended in a column of soft light. Rows of observers filled the surrounding tiers, their silhouettes outlined by the glow of their personal systems. Adam adjusted the cuff of his sleeve, glancing at the central console. I appreciate how they designed this room to feel like a trial without officially calling it one. Kyra stood beside him, her posture still, her gaze fixed on the platform. "It's efficient," she said. "Everything is efficient," Adam replied. "I'm beginning to suspect inefficiency is a banned concept here." She didn't respond, but the faint shift in her expression suggested she had noticed the pattern as well. A signal pulsed through the chamber. The interface activated. "Present when ready," a voice said, neutral and distant. Adam stepped forward, then stopped just short of the console. He glanced at Kyra. She didn't hesitate. She stepped up beside him, not behind, not waiting, beside. The light adjusted slightly, recognizing both of them as active participants. Their data unfolded in layered projections, the structure they had built rising into the space with quiet precision. Adam let out a small breath. "Well," he said under his voice, "this is the part where we either get praised or politely erased." Kyra's eyes remained on the data. "Focus." "I am focused," he said. "I'm focused on the possibility of being erased." "Not helpful," she replied. "Not inaccurate," he said. She ignored that, her hand moving through the interface to initiate the sequence. The projections shifted, guiding the observers through the first layer of their analysis. The room remained silent, not the empty silence of disinterest, but the attentive silence of evaluation. Kyra began. Her voice was steady, clear, and direct, each word placed with precision. She didn't soften the structure, didn't adjust the tone to accommodate expectation. She simply presented the data as it was, letting the patterns speak without interference. Adam watched the room as much as the projections. Subtle movements, slight shifts in posture, the occasional flicker of personal displays as observers cross-referenced their own data. It was a conversation happening without sound. He stepped in when needed, adding context where the structure required expansion, clarifying connections without diluting them. His tone carried a lighter edge, not enough to undermine the seriousness, but enough to keep the tension from locking the room into resistance. At one point, as a particularly dense pattern unfolded, he paused. "Before anyone asks," he said, "yes, we did check if this was a data error, several times. Unfortunately, it was consistent." A faint ripple moved through the chamber, not laughter, but something close. Kyra didn't react outwardly, but the timing of her next transition aligned perfectly, as if she had anticipated the shift. The presentation moved deeper. The patterns grew more interconnected, the inconsistencies more visible. What had once been isolated incidents now formed a structure that was difficult to dismiss. And then they reached the center, the point where interpretation became unavoidable. Kyra paused. Not long, just enough. Then she expanded the final layer. The chamber seemed to narrow slightly, the projections sharpening as the full structure revealed itself. Boundary violations, defensive responses, systematic reclassification, a cycle. Adam felt the shift in the room before anyone spoke. It wasn't disagreement yet, it was recognition. That was always the moment before resistance. A voice broke the silence. "You are asserting that the classification model is fundamentally flawed." The tone was controlled, but the question carried weight. Kyra didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said. Another pause. "Based on your interpretation of the data." Adam stepped in, his tone calm. "Based on the pattern repetition across independent data sets." The voice continued. "Patterns can be interpreted in multiple ways." "Of course," Adam replied. "That's why we tested for alternative explanations." Kyra adjusted the display, pulling forward a comparative model. "None of them held," she said. The silence returned, but it had changed again. It was sharper now, more active. Another voice, different this time. "Your conclusions may be perceived as confrontational." Adam blinked once, then glanced at Kyra. She didn't look at him, but there was a faint shift in her posture. He stepped forward slightly. "That's consistent with the feedback we received," he said. "We considered adjusting the tone." A brief pause. "And," the voice prompted. Adam smiled faintly. "We decided accuracy was more useful." This time the ripple was unmistakable. Not agreement, not amusement, but movement. Kyra continued, her voice steady as she reinforced the structure, guiding the room through the final connections. She didn't argue. She didn't defend. She presented. And that, Adam realized, was more disruptive than either. The questions continued. Some were direct, some were carefully indirect. Each one tested the structure from a different angle, looking for weaknesses, for gaps, for anything that could be used to reduce the impact. Kyra answered without hesitation. Adam supported where needed. Together, they held the shape of the work steady. At one point, a longer silence settled over the chamber. No questions, no movement, just consideration. Adam exhaled quietly, glancing at Kyra. Well, he murmured, just low enough for her to hear, we're either very convincing or very inconvenient. Kyra didn't look at him. Inconvenient, she said. He nodded slightly. That tracks. The interface dimmed slightly, signaling the end of the presentation phase. Your work will be reviewed, the original voice said. Of course it would. Everything here was reviewed. Adam stepped back from the console, the light fading around him. Kyra remained still for a moment longer, her gaze fixed on the now empty space where their data had been. Then she stepped back as well. They stood side by side again, the distance between them unchanged, but something about it different, not smaller, just, clearer. As they turned to leave, the chamber remained quiet behind them. But it wasn't the same silence that had greeted them. It wasn't disbelief. It wasn't dismissal. It was something slower, something that took time. Adam glanced at Kyra as they reached the corridor. You know, he said, for a moment there, I thought they might actually agree with us. Kyra's expression didn't change, but her voice carried a faint trace of something lighter. That would have been inefficient, she said. Adam smiled. Right, he replied. We can't have that. The station did not change overnight, which Adam found both reassuring and slightly disappointing. Systems this large preferred slow adjustments, subtle recalibrations that could be denied if necessary. It had been several cycles since the presentation, and the corridors still looked the same. The artificial constellations still shifted in their careful patterns, and the quiet hum beneath everything remained constant. But the responses had begun. They arrived in fragments at first, requests for clarification, invitations to discuss specific sections of their work, carefully worded inquiries that tried very hard not to sound like agreement. Adam read through them with a faint, thoughtful expression. Well, he said, scrolling through another message, we're not being ignored. Kyra stood near the transparent panel at the edge of the lab, her gaze fixed on the slow rotation of the asteroid field outside. That wasn't likely, she said. No, Adam agreed, but I expected more resistance. There is resistance, she replied. It's just structured. He glanced at her. Of course it is. Another message appeared, this one less cautious than the others. Adam opened it, scanning the contents. Ah, he said, this one is almost honest. Kyra turned slightly. Almost. They disagree with our conclusions, he said, but they also can't explain why. That's not disagreement, she said. That's delay. Adam smiled faintly. You're getting very good at this. I was always good at this, she replied. Fair, he said. You're getting more patient then. Kyra didn't answer immediately. That alone was enough to confirm the observation. She moved away from the panel, stepping toward the central interface. The projections activated as she approached. Their structure familiar now. No longer something they were building, but something that existed. They're going to adapt it, she said. Adam joined her, studying the data. Yes. They'll adjust the model, she continued. Not fully, not yet, but enough to reduce the inconsistencies. He nodded slowly. Incremental change. Very safe. Very controlled, she said. Adam considered that, then tilted his head slightly. Does that bother you? Kyra's gaze remained on the data. No, he raised an eyebrow. That sounded almost calm. It's effective, she said. More than rejection would be. Adam smiled. You're right. She glanced at him briefly. You're surprised. I'm impressed, he replied. That earned him a brief look, one that lingered just a fraction longer than before. I expected you to want a more direct outcome, he added. I did, she said. And now? He asked. Kyra looked back at the projections, her expression steady. Now I understand the structure better, she said. Adam nodded, the answer settling into place. That's dangerous, he said. Yes, she agreed. A quiet pause followed, not empty, but complete. Adam leaned back slightly against the console, his posture more relaxed than it had been at the beginning of the project. You know, he said, for something that started as a questionable decision, this turned out less disastrous than expected. Kyra's eyes shifted to him. You expected disaster. I always expect disaster, he replied. It makes success more surprising. She studied him for a moment, then asked, do you consider this success? Adam thought about it. The messages, the adjustments, the subtle shift in how their work was being treated. Not dismissed, not fully accepted, but engaged with. Yes, he said finally, I do. Kyra considered that, then gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Good, she said. Adam blinked. That's it? That's sufficient, she replied. He laughed quietly. You have a very efficient way of acknowledging things. It saves time, she said. He pushed himself away from the console, walking toward the viewing platform that extended from the lab. The transparent barrier separated them from open space, though it felt more symbolic than protective. Kyra followed after a moment. They stood side by side, looking out at the slow, deliberate motion of the station's surroundings. Distant ships moved along calculated paths, their trajectories intersecting without collision, each one adjusting just enough to maintain balance. Adam watched them for a while before speaking. You were right, he said. Kyra glanced at him. About what? About the system, he replied. It doesn't change because it's wrong. It changes because it has to. She nodded once. Yes. He exhaled slowly. I used to think pointing out the problem was enough. And now? She asked. Now I think it's just the beginning, he said. Kyra's gaze returned to the stars. That's more accurate. Adam smiled faintly. I'm improving. You are, she said. There was no hesitation in the words. That more than anything felt like change. A new notification appeared on Adam's wrist display. He glanced down at it, then let out a quiet breath. What is it? Kyra asked. Another request, he said. They want us to collaborate on the next phase. Kyra's expression didn't shift immediately. Together? She asked. Yes. A brief silence followed. Then slowly she nodded. That's acceptable, she said. Adam looked at her, a small grin forming. High praise. Don't make it inefficient, she replied. I'll try, he said. They stood there for a moment longer, the station moving around them, the stars holding their distant positions. Adam tilted his head slightly. You know, when I chose you, I wasn't entirely sure what would happen. Kyra glanced at him. You still chose. I did, he said. She studied him, her expression quieter now, less guarded. That was, inconvenient, she said. Adam laughed softly. I've been told. A faint shift crossed her features, something lighter, something unburdened. And correct, she added. The words settled between them, simple and clear. Adam didn't respond immediately. He didn't need to. The system hadn't been fixed. The patterns hadn't disappeared. But something had changed. Not everything, just enough. And for once, that was more than sufficient.